All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Hannah Crapeau. I'm the Content Marketing Manager at Certiport. We're happy to have everyone joining us for our second Certified Academy Design webinar of 2024. We'd love to see everyone drop into the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from and what courses you teach and what you're hoping to learn with us here today. Now, this session has been previously recorded, so you'll receive a link to the full recording via email after our presentation is wrapped. But if you have questions as they come up throughout our presentation, feel free to drop those into the chat or the Q&A as well. We'll make sure to address those after we finish with the recorded portion. This session, we did just want to give a quick shout out. It's being sponsored by the Autodesk Certified User Certification Program. The Autodesk Certified User Certification is an industry recognized credential that can effectively start students' careers as designers, engineers, and makers. It enhances students' higher ed applications and resumes by providing the evidence of competency and proficiency. Help your students design and make a better world by starting with Autodesk certification. And we'll drop the link here into the chat shortly so that people can get a little bit more information if you're not familiar. And today we're talking about all things hands-on learning in the classroom, and we're so privileged to be learning from John Beal. John began his educational career working in museums, including the Spanish Colonial Quarter, the Florida Agricultural Museum, and the Florida Maritime Museum. After more than a decade in experiential education, he brought his experience to the classroom, first at middle school level teaching science and STEM marine science before finding his place at Alan D. Nease High School in St. Johns County, Florida, teaching introduction to engineering and design, civil engineering and architecture, and computer integrated manufacturing, and sponsoring the Transportation Technology Club with a focus on aerospace and electrothons motorsports. He believes that industry certification creates a solid pathway to college careers and creativity, that collaboration and cooperation in and out of the classroom benefits all involved. And John is just an incredible educator. We're so excited to be learning here with him today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can see you, John. The beard looks just the same, though, I have to say. The headshot is so representative. It looks great. But before we dive in, John, I just wanted to give you a quick chance to introduce yourself. We gave your professional bio, but tell us a little bit about you.
Without just echoing the whole professional bio again, I think probably the big pieces for me is I've worked in a lot of different fields, mostly in education related to technical knowledge, uh, but have always kind of focused on connecting people with information, making information easier to understand, and sort of directing people towards ways that they can use that information for whatever projects they're interested in.
Mhm. I love that. And so I think the concept of play and hands-on learning, you and I have talked about this for the podcast before. I know that this is a subject that you're really passionate about. And I think that ties in really well with what you're saying, the proliferation of information and making sure people understand what's being taught. So why do you think it's so important to integrate play and hands-on learning in the classroom?
So I think integrating play into hands-on learning in the classroom is valuable because so I think the first thing is to take kind of a half step back
Hmm.
and look at so the way I would define play in the classroom, I think there's a tendency to look at it's only play in the classroom if it's clearly a game.
Mm.
And I think it's broader than that. I think anytime that you're using simulation or you're trying to replicate a real world condition, I think qualifies as play in the classroom. Anything that's not just okay, I'm going to stand here and read out of my textbook for 30 minutes and you're going to pretend like you're interested and engaged with it. Um, Anything that helps engage with the information is
Mhm.
valuable. One of my first mentors at the first museum I worked at always said that if you can get them to start learning before they realize they're learning anything, you've got half the battle right there. And I
Mhm.
think play is a great way to do that. It's a way to disarm that initial resistance sometimes to
Yeah.
like, well, I already know how to do this. I don't have to pay attention. And fortunately, I feel like at least in the CTE world, we don't have to deal with that as much necessarily as like in
Sure.
a core class where it's, well, when am I ever going to use this random algebraic equation? Well, in
Mhm.
engineering, if I'm giving you an algebraic equation, I'm telling you exactly what we use it for.
Yeah.
So that helps a little bit, but I still think it's valuable in creating that initial engagement, especially with somebody that teaches freshmen where they're coming from a middle school environment where middle
Mm.
school STEM, which I also taught. So I
Yeah.
no disparagement meant, but it's a different environment than
Yeah.
high school engineering. And so getting them over that initial curve of this is this is very different from that, although there's a lot
Hmm.
of the same core behind it.
Hmm.
So I think the big advantage to it is that it creates an environment where students can have more control in their learning, and that
Mm.
control creates individual buy-in, and that's key to getting them to listen to the more in-depth information.
Yeah. And one thing, when you and I have talked about this previously, that you also mentioned, I thought was so interesting, is that play helps balance rigor with engagement, right? It's really easy to teach a rigorous course and make things incredibly difficult, but how do you balance that rigor of learning difficult subject matter with keeping students engaged? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that here as well. How do you find that that works out with hands-on learning?
Yeah, I think that's a continual balancing act of finding
Mm,
that place between rigor and between engagement, because just as easily as you can go, okay, well, we're going to make this, it's all algebraic equations and it's all
yeah,
just the theory behind it. It's also just as easy to throw that all out and go, okay, well, here's, Lego kits, go play for an hour,
yeah.
which there's value in that, but without any structure or framework or why behind it.
Hmm.
I think a lot of that value is lost. So it is. It's always a balancing act between rigor and engagement. Um, I think part of it also is that you can shift that even during the same project. You can, if you've got something that's a very technical concept that you're trying to teach, starting
Hmm.
heavier on the engagement side to get that initial buy-in and interest, and then pushing back towards rigor now that you've got the interest in it,
Hmm.
can be a really valuable technique.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about, and I'm sure some of the examples that you've used for open-ended projects right behind you is starting with those kind of open-ended projects where students get really excited because it's very hands-on. So tell us about some of those that you've kind of used in the classroom.
Absolutely. So for the freshmen, I tend to work with things that have a finite sort of
Mm,
endpoint. For the juniors, especially in the manufacturing class, we work a little bit more, and with civil engineering as well. We work with a little bit more of an open project where we sort of have a very minimal design brief for it. Of
mm,
it has to achieve these things, it has to
mhm.
incorporate these pieces, but how you get there and what the end product is going to look like is going to be determined by the student or the group of
Right.
students, depending on the project. And that's really valuable because again it creates that buy-in, because it's their project even if
Hmm.
it's your sort of overarching
Yeah.
plan, and that works just wonderfully for getting students involved and excited about things that otherwise might be a little dry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in thinking about this, I'm sure there's a lot of subjects. I know engineering kind of gets a bad rap of being something that can be super dry, and you've been able to turn it around in your classroom, make it super fun and engaging. So, what have you done, and what do other educators need to do to make education a more playful experience, do you think?
So I think there's a couple approaches to it, from the top down side, so to speak, from the teacher to the student side of things. One of the things to do is to pick projects that you as a teacher are excited about.
Mm,
Because if you're excited about it, you're going to be excited about it when you're talking to the students. And
yeah.
to some extent, that's contagious. And that's really useful to get that going,
Hmm.
especially if you're late in the year and you just need that extra drive to keep going, or whatever the case may be. The other thing with that side of creating something that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, is that where you're doing that project this year doesn't mean that you have to do that same project next year.
Mm,
You can always adapt it, or if it doesn't work, you can completely shift and go in another
hmm.
direction. The other side of that is sort of from bottom up, from the student side of things, is you know make sure that you're, so like I'm in a computer lab, and
Hmm.
a lot of what we do is software based because we do the AutoCAD, Autodesk
Hmm.
certified user programs every year for the whole 4 years of the academy. um, but to make sure that you're moving around the room, that you're listening to conversations, because you don't have to have the whole class necessarily engaged in it, but if you have an individual student that's really passionate about cars or
Mm,
aerospace or whatever, to make that connection to engineering in my case,
mhm,
is a great way for sort of creating that segue of, okay, so that's great, let's talk about this for a minute or two and connect it back to our curriculum, and
mhm,
then sort of redirect back into whatever task is on hand, and it feels um, much more positive, and I think has a better result in the classroom community than
mhm.
just the typical of like, okay, that's enough talking about this, back to work. Which, you have to have that
There's
balance. You
something
can't
to be
spend
said for that. Yeah.
30
Yeah.
minutes talking about cars as much as you might want to, but um, using that as a changeover, a loop back into whatever the recent lesson is, and then back to work
Mhm.
works really well.
Okay, I love that. So, in thinking about these students, I love the idea of kind of getting a consistent pulse on what they're thinking and what they're excited about. As you've used play in the classroom, what have you found that your students have learned both from hard skills as well as like the soft skills side? Do you find that play is helpful for both of those?
Absolutely, yeah. So the hard skill side, where we've really seen a lot of benefit is, so the manufacturing class is relatively new, and we're
Mm,
still kind of
yeah.
working the details out. But the civil engineering class I've been doing since I started here at NEAS, so this is the fourth year.
Hmm.
And one of the big overarching projects that I do that I definitely would consider kind of play in the classroom is the students as a group vote for, in each of the classes, vote for a location, and we basically create a development in that location.
Mm,
So they have to look at, how is the climate going to affect it? How logistics wise, if it's somewhere, we had one group one year that was way out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. And so we had to have that discussion of like, okay, so let's say that we do that. How do we get all the building materials there?
mm,
Which is in that particular case, was a very challenging, having to start thinking through that,
yeah.
because not only is it remote, but it's remote and the weather is not great.
Not conducive. Yeah.
So you have to time it. You had like, there's this whole extra layer
Mm,
of things that we were able to get into. And so it was great to have this very real world conversation
yeah.
that if we were just going by the textbook, probably would have never came up, but is a really
Hmm.
good example of why logistics is important in any kind of an engineering industry, and why you have to plan
Hmm.
ahead, and why you're not looking, this today or this week or this month, but you're looking all the way to the end of the project and then
Hmm.
working backwards.
Hmm. Oh, I like that. So, from a soft skills perspective, what have you, as students kind of progress through your curriculum because you see them for multiple years, what do you feel like they kind of struggle with at the beginning as you're starting to use play with them? And then where do you find that they are kind of at the end? What progresses in the soft skills area?
The biggest thing in the soft skills that we see over the 4 years in the program is, and it's not exclusive to like just because they're in our program, it's
Sure.
across our
Sure.
campus, but I can't help but think that the way we do our group projects
Mm,
contributes to like interpersonal dynamics and communication, and being able to communicate effectively and respectfully in a
mm,
small group setting where you are both contributing effectively but not overrunning the whole conversation,
mhm.
I think is a really big one.
Yeah. I think that one, that piece alone, when you're talking about working collaboratively with a team, which I know engineers always are working with multiple people, right? You have to be able to bounce ideas off of each other. That communication piece is so important. And to your point, if we're working just on a worksheet, we're not going to be able to develop that set of skills. And so in thinking about um play and experiential learning, I think one of the things that is really unique about your program is you have the opportunity to make things so hands-on. But to your point earlier, we have teachers who are maybe teaching different subjects where it's a little bit more difficult. So what would your advice be to them? Let's say I'm teaching something that it tends to be more siloed, right? It's not something that naturally leads into that playful experience. What would your advice be for educators who want to create a more experiential classroom?
So I would say the thing to do is start with one idea for play, one idea for a
Mm.
game, however you want to phrase it, and that lesson's going to look obviously different for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, but take it, think about learning experiences that you've had in your career or in
Mm.
your professional life, especially because with CTE, we get so many people
Yeah.
that come from industry and then come into teaching,
Hmm.
and they bring absolutely invaluable experience with them in that. And so, if you can think of an important lesson from industry that you're bringing with you, or an important lesson that perhaps you sometimes struggle with student engagement on, and then look at how you can turn that into play.
Mm.
So I had a discussion with one of our logistics CTE teachers in the district, because he was, kind of looking at how he could do things. Um, and it wasn't entirely my idea. It was just kind of a mutual conversation.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be like, this was my idea and it's great. Um, but one of the things we talked about with him was, looking at, so what if your students ran like a simulated transport company?
Mm.
And you could start with, because all the data is there if you know where to look. I don't, but he does, because that's what
Hmm.
he did professionally before he came to teaching.
Yeah.
And so you could start them with, okay, so you all start with 5 semi trucks, and you've got to move material, or you've got to make money. You've got your 5 semi trucks, and it costs you this much per day to have them. How
Hmm.
are you going to make the profit? And then building from semi trucks to then going to, commercial shipping, to then going to commercial air freight. And then in a senior year project, now you've got all of those resources available. And how, what part of the market are you going to target? What part
Hmm.
of, are you going to look at a geographical area? Are you going to look at a type of cargo? Are you going to look at a type of transportation? And how all those pieces come together. And I'm not sure exactly what he's done with it. I haven't had a chance to
Mm.
touch back in with him, but that's one of those things where something that is, really is a niche industry, in the sense of
Sure.
it's a very specific set of skills, even though it touches literally
So many
everything
other
else.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So if I'm looking at your curriculum in the classroom that you work in, you have all of these open-ended projects, all of these play-based learning experiences that you have integrated throughout the year, but you also mentioned that you do the certification program. So I'm curious how you've been able to kind of balance those and where those two kind of plug in together.
Yeah, so they absolutely plug into each other.
Mm.
So, for example, with the freshmen, I start them with AutoCAD right out of the gate, and initially, like, we do a technical drawing every week, so like a piece
Mm.
out of a blueprint. And the first several weeks, it started, like, the first one, I walk them through it step by step, like it's up on the big screen, and they see everything that's going. And then over the next several weeks, we kind of start taking the training wheels off.
Yeah.
And then by this point in the year, they're doing multi-view drawing. So they're drawing 3 different views of the same object and dimensioning it and everything else. So that kind of handles the how part of how we get them ready for certification,
Sure.
because with any software, the biggest thing is just being familiar enough with it that you're not afraid of the
Yeah.
software.
Yeah.
And so we're able to incorporate, because we start building those skills right from the beginning of the year, we're able to
Mm.
incorporate that into our projects. So
Hmm.
by second quarter, when they're doing what we've typically done is an egg drop, so
Hmm.
very specific list of, like, you can only use this materials, it has to
Hmm.
fit these requirements, but they're able to draw a basic blueprint of it in AutoCAD and use that as part of their documentation for their
Mm.
sort of digital engineering notebook on it. And then by third quarter, we're designing cardboard bridges. Let's see, I've got one right here. And so we're able to have them uh, design cardboard
Look at
bridges,
that.
and they research bridges, they research how structures work, how trusses
Hmm.
work. They design it in AutoCAD initially, then they take it into West Point Bridge Designer, which is a free sort of physics simulation that
Mm.
shows where you have tension and compression in the bridge. So
Hmm.
then they can really understand what's happening in that truss system. And then they take
Mm.
it back into AutoCAD and design it into something that we can send to the laser cutter and cut out. And it all goes together with, you probably can't see it, but it has little slots and tabs that all go
Yeah.
together. So everything fits. It assembles really fast. They're able to build them in just a day or two of class time.
Hmm.
And then we're able to test them till they break and see where they fail and what works, what doesn't, and kind of have a discussion about that afterwards. So it works really
Mm.
well.
And then testing, of course, for the certification, is that typically at the end of the year? Where do you plug that piece?
So we put that at the end of third quarter, and we
Mm,
do that so that if students aren't able to pass on a first attempt but are close
sure.
enough that it looks like, it might have been that it was a computer issue on our side or just
Yeah.
wasn't a good day for them, it gives
Yeah.
us enough time that we can have them retest before the end of the year.
Okay. I love that. Well, this has been so insightful, and I feel like you're such an expert in this area. I mean, starting out in kind of that museum industry where everything is hands-on and play-based, it really has made you an expert in this space. So I just wanted to see any final thoughts that you wanted to share on this subject before we wrap up.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is, and I don't know, I feel kind of cliche saying it, but like, don't be afraid to try stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to jump into this space new to this kind of thing and go, yep, we're going to do it all year for everything.
Hmm.
But it's very easy to go, okay, well, let's try a little something that's going to take 2 or 3 class days and see how that works, see how the students engage with it, see how I feel teaching it. um, it's like everything else, it's an ongoing learning process. And I think that's one of the valuable things about it too, is even if something doesn't work the way you expect it to be, if you're honest with the students about it, I think that's really valuable for them because they can see that, like, it's not just you telling them, well, you've got to
Yeah.
have a growth mindset. It's going, no, we've all, like, we're all in this together. We're all going
Yeah.
to try it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
Hmm.
But we're going to learn something from it either way.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to your point that you made previously, keeping a pulse on what they feel like works and what they feel like doesn't, right, can help you adjust your curriculum as you go along, and seeing how they engage with it, I think really makes a big impact.
Absolutely.
Well, I am so grateful that you got to come and talk with us a little bit more about this. You're just going to be my go-to for all things play and kind of project-based learning. So we're really excited that we got to spend some time talking about this again.
Yeah.
I did just want to give a couple announcements for those who are attending our live session, that as part of Certified Academy Design, we do offer a boot camp. So John teaches Autodesk Certified User in the classroom. We've had other educators in previous weeks who've talked about Adobe Certified Professional. If you are interested in learning more about how to bring that curriculum or the practice test or the certification exams into your classroom, this is a great place to start to kind of test it out, see if it'll work for your kids. You can email us at certifiedacademy@pearson.com, and we can also get you more information from our blog, which I'll drop the link into the chat here shortly. The second announcement is that all of this kind of learning that we do throughout the school year is a build up to our annual certified conference that's happening in Orlando, June 17th through the 19th. So we're getting really close now to this conference. But if you're looking to enhance your experience or learn more from John, who will actually be presenting on site at that conference, or you want to connect with him or other educators, this is a great opportunity to do that. So certiport.com, and you can learn a little bit more about the conference and our community and how you can stay engaged with us there. The third announcement is that next week we'll be discussing how to use design thinking in the development process, and John will be back with us to be able to talk a little bit more about that. But this is a session that will be a chance to learn about Intuit's Design for Delight approach to creativity and development, and how that can impact your approach, not just as an educator, but how your students can use that framework as well as they're working through the projects that you use in the classroom. So we hope that you're able to join us for that. As always, thank you so much for spending time with us, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.